It was a request by Vice President Uden, I believe at the study session meeting when you guys passed the new resolution for the OCSD alternate district engineer. I think his name was Daniel something.
Yes, and we signed the board assigned a different person from OCSD.
Yeah.
Well, what we could do, the committee, if the we can review. I don't recall what Vice President Uden's concerns were. What we could do is just delay this one and bring it back to the study session and have Vice President Uden tell us what his concerns are.
Yeah, that sounds probably the best way.
Yeah, I agree with Art. I mean, I thought it had something to do with some grammatical stuff, but now that Angela said that, that's ringing bells.
Okay. Well, we'll bring it back to the study session and then ask Vice President Uden what he had intended for us to change, and then we can make those revisions. So another a new policy we want the committee to review is the naming facilities policy, administrative regulations policy. As you know, the board approved renaming the corporate yard to Robin Hamer's Yard, which if you have not seen the signs out there, I think it turned out very nice. It was well done. So this sets precedent, and the board wanted to have a policy in place for future naming facilities, which really limits us. I mean, we don't have a lot of facilities. If the board wants to name a facility, it's going to be really up one of the 20 pump stations or headquarters. That's basically what's left, but you could do that. So under the board's direction, we brought back to you a policy for renaming facilities for your considerations, and looking for your comments and feedback today.
Did Alan have a chance to look at it?
No, he has not. When we're done with all the comments, we will make sure we will have Alan review everything before we present to the board.
Okay, it looks good to me.
The only question I had, Scott, was under the definition. Do we have anything other than buildings or lift stations?
That's what I said. That's it.
Is there any other?
That's all we have. It's headquarters and lift stations.
Now, Scott, one of Mr. Mosher's comments for public comments was to add meeting rooms. Would we consider that, like the boardroom or the conference room? I thought that was a good idea.
If that's the board wants to do that, if you want to do meeting rooms, like if you want to rename the boardroom to someone, we could do that. Sure.
That's kind of I have that on my radar too. Instead of saying under the definition, say buildings or any part of the building, or something to that effect. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, or like exterior, interior buildings, right?
Or parts of the building.
Yeah.
Again, you're talking about the conference room or the boardroom or whatever.
Right.
Or designated areas of the building, like the break room.
You're a lot smarter than me, Diana. That's exactly what I meant.
I don't. Well, I'm just thinking like the break room. If we wanted to name that after somebody.
I think you ought to name that after Scott. The Scott Carroll break room.
Or how about the bathroom too? Name the bathroom after someone.
You could.
Yeah. If you name those bathrooms after anybody, it needs to be the guy that cleans them, because those cool bathrooms in the area.
The David bathroom.
There you go.
Can we make that change? Diana, can we make that change on the definition then?
Yeah, so what would you want? So facility means buildings, wastewater lift stations, or what did we say?
Designated areas is the same, yeah.
Okay, yeah. That's probably better than meeting rooms, yeah.
Right.
Gina, if you don't mind.
I have a question.
Yes, go ahead, Sue.
Under objectives, it says on number 4, assure the quality of time name that it will serve the purpose of the district in a permanent manner. But it doesn't say anywhere else in the policy that once it's named, either it stays that name forever or it stays that name for a minimum amount of years? Because I know there are some places that will rename a building after 50 years or whatever. But shouldn't it stipulate like that once it's named that, it stays that for, you know, the duration or a minimum of 50 years or something? Because it doesn't emphatically say that once it's named that, it's not changing.
It does,
Angela, if
because
you
it
could
says
scroll, or
in a
Gina, if you could
permanent
scroll down, I thought there was something in the policy that says that you could change the name. There was some way you can do that. If you could scroll down the second page, please.
But you know what I'm thinking of? Say the building is named after somebody, 10 years later, a big scandal comes out. We want the option to be able to remove that name. Not
Yeah,
that that's going to happen.
If we go to the second
Well,
page,
Which
Yeah, look
Which
under
that
F
would-
under rename.
yeah, go down. Hey, Gina, can you go to the second page, please?
Let's see.
sure. Okay, I'm under renaming.
Oh, yes, the last sentence. Facilities named for subjects other than individuals may be changed in name only if the current name is ineffectual or inappropriate. So does that cover it?
Yes, and I believe if you want, we could put a time frame if you want, but I think this section renaming gives us some room to, you know, we want to change our now. If the board wants to change the name of someone, you know, they can do that. They can rename it.
Yeah, Scott.
Yeah,
I think
and
rather than put a time frame on it, I would rather see us put a phrase in there that any future board with good intentions can change a name. You know, give future boards a chance. I mean, there's stuff named all over the city of Costa Mesa that nobody's ever heard of. Ask anybody who Charlie T. Winkle was, for example.
He was
Well,
the first mayor of Costa Mesa.
Well, he was
Yeah.
also, but he was also the district's first president.
Right. But I mean, future boards there may be another Rob Hamers that comes up, or there may be another Caitlin Tran that comes up in the future that we want to name something after.
Sure.
I mean, give future boards the opportunity to change something. That's all I'm asking.
Okay. So.
Well, number 7 kind of handles that already. The board of directors has final approval and may reject or any naming or renaming request.
Right.
So that's in there already.
Yeah, that's right, Art. I'd forgotten that.
Now, are we limiting anything by having just the Citizens Advisory Committee consider the request? Do you see any issues with that?
Well, no, I think it says, again, on number 1, it says staff, district, or residents can propose a name. So anyone can propose a name. But it goes through the process. It gets vetted through the Citizens Advisory Committee. They make their recommendation. Ultimately, the board makes that decision. But anyone can submit a nomination, a name changing.
See, I think number 7 handles all of that right now.
Right.
Yeah. So if the Citizens Advisory Committee rejected it, the board could always say, no, we do want to consider it.
Yes.
Sure. The board, the committee would say the committee would say we don't recommend this name, or we recommend a different name, and
Right. Okay.
the board makes that ultimate decision.
Okay.
Diana, I have a question for you. You read Mr. Mosier's comments, obviously. Did you get the sense that he thinks that this is kind of a silly thing that we're doing? That it's not necessary?
Why don't we do this? Why don't we do this? Gina, can you read his comments regarding this policy to the public?
Sure. Let me just get those.
I'm not sure you need to read all. I'm sorry to interrupt. Just the basic part. I thought I read something in his comments that he didn't think we should be doing this.
Well, I think we should read it for transparency purposes, and you know, because the public can't see it in front of them, so I think we need to read it.
Okay. Yeah. Good point.
And I'm not sure he understood our purpose of it, or.
I agree with that, Diana. I agree.
Okay. Did you find it, Gina?
Yes. So the naming of the district facilities policy section,
Yes, yes, please.
Mr. Mosier's comments are from the notation at the top of the attachment. This is Administrative Regulations number 70.00. It is not self-evident from that what CMSD administrative regulations are, who approves them, or where one finds them. Confusingly, a search of the CMSD website for administrative regulations turns up only one thing, which is an earlier document entitled Administrative Regulations number 70.00, but defining the district's performance measurement program. The confusion in numbers notwithstanding, it is also not self-evident if this is a revision of an existing regulation or a wholly new one. If this is a wholly new one, was it created out of whole cloth or modeled after some other agency's regulation? If the latter, what agency's policy or regulation was it modeled after? As their needs and values may differ from CMSD's, and what modifications were made.
Thank you, Gina. I can address.
Sure.
Was there more? Is that it?
Yeah, that keeps going. Number 3 after that on the next
Okay.
page.
Sorry.
There's a whole nother page and a quarter.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay. Okay, number 3, as to the details of the attachment, general comment. As to the aforementioned lack of context, how does the board see this policy being used? Exactly what facilities does CMSD anticipate a need or wish to name or rename? The lift stations, the headquarters building. In section B, under definition, let me just move to that section. Okay. Naming policies often include the possibility of naming not just buildings, but areas within buildings, such as meeting rooms. It is wise and common to define references to non-living persons by setting some minimum time, such as 5 years, for which the person must be dead before naming can be considered. This relieves the agency from the difficulty of having to deal tactfully with emotionally charged requests from grieving friends or relatives. In section C, objectives, the motivation for naming policies is often a wish to use facility naming as a reward for private fundraising campaigns or contributions. That does not seem a complete impossibility for CMSD. For example, to recognize a donation of land for a facility should a donation be negotiated. Yet the restriction to non-living persons in proposed section B4 seems to preclude such recognition. In section D, it is common to prioritize the categories of names. In the case of CMSD, if the primary purpose of naming is to improve recognition of the facility's identity and location, I think there should be a strong encouragement of choosing geographically meaning names over names of people. In fact, I think CMSD's current, apparently unwritten policy of naming lift stations and facilities in general after the streets on which they are located is a good one. I don't see any reason to change it, yet it does seem to be clearly written into the proposed policy. Changing the existing lift station names seems like it would create more confusion than good. The next section is specific comments. I would end section A, purpose, at district facilities and move owned and operated by the Costa Mesa Sanitary District to the end of section B. Thus, it would read, district facilities means buildings or wastewater lift stations owned and operated by the Costa Mesa Sanitary District. In section B, sub-item 5, I would delete "or for the community as a whole." Cities and counties have ample opportunities to recognize locally prominent people. I think CMSD should confine its naming to whose renown is related to district activities. In section F, renaming, I suspect the word crucial was intended to read critical. And lastly, in section G, sub-item 7, and/or could simply be or. Those are the end of Mr. Mosher's comments.
Great, thank you, Gina. To address some of Mr. Mosher's comments, in the beginning, I think he mentioned who approves the admin regulation, how they adopted. I believe that's all identified in the code. I could find that for you specifically, but I believe it's in the operations code that talks about the board adopting admin regulation. As far as the number goes, that was an error on our part. We can always, definitely when we got the final admin regulations for approval consideration, the numbering sequences are correct. As far as did we adopt this model from another agency? Yes, we did. Unfortunately, I just don't remember which agency it was. I mean, I think that's one of the great things about our profession. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. So I found. I
don't think that matters. I mean, putting it in the ordinance doesn't really do anything other than give credit to the other agencies. So I don't think that's an issue.
Yeah. No, I think he was just concerned that, well, is there I guess what did he say? Maybe their beliefs are different than ours, and so again, I think we found one that a policy that's we think would be a good fit for us, and so that's why we created the one before you.
And we're tailoring it to our needs or our facility.
Yes.
Or our district.
I think we addressed the area. You talk about areas within the buildings. I think that's a good suggestion. We can definitely amend the policy to include like the boardroom or meeting rooms. I think that's a good suggestion. As far as renaming lift stations, keeping them geographically, the names geographic locations. Again, it's up to the board. I think again, if you want a renaming policy, we're limited to what we can rename. And lift stations are one of those facilities we can rename. We can always rename it with the person's name at the address, at the, it could be, Dan Worthington Pump Station at Geisler Street, something like that.
Stadium, Los Angeles Angel Stadium of Anaheim.
Yeah, it can work. I do think some of his grammar corrections at the end are appropriate. Naming, making sure that we say that the lift stations are owned by the Costa Mesa Sanitary. I think that's appropriate. So we can make those adjustments. That's not a problem.
The one thing I don't want us to do personally is he had made mention of, waiting 5 years until someone passed away to name. That takes away a lot of credibility. 5 years later, the effect is gone.
Yeah, and that's his recommendations, and again, we can agree to disagree. So
yeah, absolutely.
I think on that it makes me think of like when Kobe Bryant passed away, people just wanted to jump on renaming everything after him, and so I get where he's going with that, but I don't see that being an issue necessarily for us.
I absolutely agree. I mean, it's like you got to wait 5 years until you retire from baseball to be in the Hall of Fame. But yet, somebody who passed away, the Baseball Hall of Fame will put them in right away if they need to. So, time limit, I just think that diminishes from the effect that we're trying to portray.
Well, for one, we only have a 4-year term technically. We may miss the 5 years and have a new board that doesn't know who the people are. That's
a good point. I thought about it in those terms. That's an excellent point, Art.
I agree with you 100%.
Yeah.
Okay. So those are the comments. Any other comments, suggestions on this policy before we move on?
I think you touched on most of the big ones. He just
hope
expressed.
that if,
Yes, Sue?
yeah, I just hope that if, for instance, like Art or Mike say that in 4 years, let's say there's a board that doesn't know who someone is, just because they don't know who the person was, I don't think they should rename it if it's only been on the sign for 3 years. You know what I'm saying? That's the only reason why I'm concerned with the whole time
Yeah.
thing, because you guys don't want to be changing a sign every 4 years because there's a new board and they want their friend's name on it.
Okay.
And I'm not saying that that is going to happen, but it could happen.
Yeah. Well, we don't want it to be political, that's for sure.
That's a good point.
Exactly.
Well, Sue
Yeah, I
brings
think
up a
it's a good point, Sue, and I think it's incumbent upon staff to keep the historical perspective, because there will be staff. I mean, the continuity of our district is staff. It's not necessarily the board, so it'll be up to staff to keep that alive.
Well, but Director Schaefer, I mean, this is a policy, and so in the board
Yeah,
sets
yeah.
policy. So Sue is right. If we have a new board and all of a sudden they want to name the yard after their friends, because and maybe their friend might be someone who is very important in the community. I mean, they could do that under this policy. So what Sue's saying, maybe we say every 10, 20 years you can name the facility. So
Yeah, I don't-
Well, one of those things where it's a minimum of years, and then of course the exemption is always in place where if, like you said, there's a scandal or a problem or the name is deemed inappropriate. But inappropriate, somebody not knowing who that person is should not fall under inappropriate, in my opinion. And without a minimum number of years, it kind of just leaves the door open, and I am not comfortable with that. Personally, that's my 2 cents.
Sue, how many years are you
So what's the
thinking?
length of time do you recommend, Sue?
I mean, I would think at least 10 years, if not more.
I was thinking 30, but maybe go in the middle, go to 20.
20 at least. Yeah. I mean, I think that having a building named after you is an incredible honor, and it should last a significant amount of time, because what kind of message does it send if you name a building and then in 4 years you name it after somebody else? It completely takes away from the point of naming the building to begin with.
Should we put that amount of years in 20?
Sure, if that's what you
What's
want to do.
it?
You know what I'd like to see is, we stole this from some other agency. Can you just maybe give us an email update? Find out what other agencies do. I don't have a problem with putting a year limit, absolutely. But I'd be curious to see what other agencies do, if they even include that. But Sue's exactly right. I mean, a year from now, we could find out Rob did something that we didn't like and change the name, but that takes away from a lot of stuff that I don't want to get into.
Yeah, and I mean, saying facilities may be changed in the name only if current name is ineffectual or inappropriate. It says that, but
Yeah.
Ineffectual, in my opinion, it's ineffectual because I don't know who he is. It just opens the door for the argument, because it's implied in here that it's a permanent recognition, that that's what the intent is. So maybe we don't need a minimum year, as long as it's defined that, ineffectual has nothing to do with, the current board or, the opinion of the name, if they're not known, if it hasn't been a minimum of X years or something. I don't know even what the wording would be, but I just know how people can be. I've seen it too much.
Yeah. one last parting shot. Mosher had mentioned the ability to name a facility after someone who's made a major contribution to the or donation to the district. We don't take donations, so I don't know how that wouldn't apply, correct?
It could
Diana,
be.
you're
It
smiling,
could be-
so you must
No.
understand that.
Well, I'm saying, well, that's what I was thinking too. That was a little, yeah, it's almost like implying that we would take a donation or a bribe to have a facility named after them.
Well,
Yeah.
I think he's thinking, people donate land, they could donate land to us to build a station or something like that. I mean, I don't think he's
Well,
talking.
that one Metro West is gonna have to build a station, aren't they? If that gets approved.
A pump station?
I mean, are they gonna have to build a station?
No, because they're tied into OCSD.
Oh, that's right. You're right.
Yeah, I don't
Forgot.
think so.
Yeah, you're right.
I think what Mr. Mosher is referring to maybe, people could donate land to the district, and that is a possibility. But I don't
Maybe
think
we
that
need
should
to.
be- I don't think that should be
specify.
a criteria from naming someone. I mean, just donating.
Yeah,
land.
I don't think we need to include it. Is my thought.
Yeah, maybe take that out.
So what I'm hearing from the board, definitely want some kind of time limit, like 20 years. So we could definitely add that on there. And then again, like I said, Mr. Mosher had some good comments as far as grammar corrections. We can clean that up. But is there any other comments or suggestions on the policy?
Well, just what Mike suggested, look into some other policies that you looked at to see if there's a time limit for theirs, just for a reference.
Yeah, I'll look that up and report that back when we present to the full board of the study session. But if I recall, I don't remember anyone did, but we can still look.
You know,
Maybe-
overall, the ordinance is well done, and I thank you guys for doing this. I think this is a really nice gesture, and the way you guys wrote this up, I think, takes care of a lot of stuff that we have. So thanks for doing it.
Exactly. I think it was real good.
Good. Okay. Very good. Okay, we'll move on to the capital asset policy. So this was actually brought to our attention from Caitlin, and I can have Caitlin go into more details, but I believe we have to have this in our code, revise our code, which we don't. And a suggestion right here where we marked under capital assets, the second paragraph under K, that language right there is from I believe from our CAFR. We could definitely just copy and paste that and put it in the code if I'm saying that. Is that correct, Caitlin? Is that what's your suggestion?
Yes, it's something that we've been in compliance with for forever now. But I found that it's not in the operation code along with other financial policies, and the auditor did question this too. So we need to add this to the language to the operations policy along with other financial policy.
Okay.
It's missing from the financial policy section.
So we just need to be consistent.
Right.
Yeah.
I think we need to have this in our policies.
Yeah.
Are
So
you
this
talking
is
about?
not new.
Go ahead, Sue.
This
Can
is
you
not.
tell me what? Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I'm done. Go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was just wondering, like, what page of the operations code would that go into? You said it in the financial section, but where is that? Just so I can make a note in my packet that's where it goes.
Give us
It goes
one
after
second.
J, or it goes after J.
No, I think, so Caitlin, can
I'm
you look
making
that up?
it hard out.
Caitlin's looking that up.
Yes, give me a second here. The financial policy starts on page 31 of the document, and that's chapter 4.03.
Okay, I see. I'm on page 31 because I have a paper copy in front of me. I just kind of want to make a note on where it would go, so when we review the final, I know where to look for it.
Yeah, and I'm thinking it can go within F under capital improvement. Did you see?
Okay, perfect.
I have a question. So we have this is essentially a depreciation schedule, right?
Yes.
Who determined that a building is worth 20? Where did we get these parameters? Are they under the general accounting principles?
I think this is the typical what other agency are depreciating as well, and normally the $5,000 capitalization limit. That's the norm.
Okay.
But of course, it's up to the agency. That's from what I know, but I know this been here even before my time.
I'm just, did we get this from the IRS? Did we get it from some federal agency that says a building is good for 20 to 50? I'm just curious more than anything.
Yeah, I believe this is from the city. When the district separated from the city, we went along with their policy, and I think that's why it's kind of missed placing this on to our operations code.
Okay. How often do we review these time frames? Ever?
I don't think we do this every year, but as far as like how long the term on these, it's always been like that.
Okay. I know the one that stuck out to me is over the last several years, the subsurface wastewater lines, for example. Rob had talked about with the new lining and some of the stuff that they would be good for 100 years. I don't know if that's significant. If we were to change that from 60 to 80 or what, I don't know what impact that would have on the overall program, or if we even need to worry about that. But that's the one that kind of popped up to me because Rob had talked about they're finding that our lines are lasting much longer than we thought they were.
I think this
these
goes to
years
our
are still-
asset management plan.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
these years are appropriate. I mean, when you say, subsurface water line 60 years, okay, so if we're getting close to 60 years, what we would do is, okay, let's CCTV and see the condition of those pipelines. And if the pipelines are, in our opinion, still in good conditions, then it can go longer than 60 years.
That's a really good point, Scott, and I agree with that. I think if we're using these as general guidelines for us working on the capital management program, I think that's great. I was just curious more, I'm looking at these as life expectancy type things.
Right.
And so for a review, I think that's fine.
Okay.
Well, Scott, don't we look at this every year through our capital asset management plan, right?
Correct, we do.
That's how
Yeah.
we know when we'll be ordering new equipment and vehicles. And
Yep.
stuff.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Yeah.
I think even though it say, like for vehicle after from 5 to 10 years, let's just say after 10 years, it's still in good condition, it's still working. It doesn't mean that we're gonna get rid of it. It's just the depreciation is done.
Right. Yeah, I understand that and I appreciate that.
So there's no further direction from the board. If the committee makes a recommendation, we'll just add this to the operations code.
Yes. I
Yeah,
think that's
sounds good.
That's why we brought this to this meeting. To sure, how we would
Right.
do it.
Right.
Right. So with that, I think this concludes the committee. So as you know, the committee is a temporary committee. We'll make the changes and then present the committee's recommendations to the board at a study session. Try to get it in the June study session, but I can't promise that. June looks like it'd be a pretty busy month, both on the study session and the board of directors. Since there's really no time frame to get these things adopted, I mean, we could push it back in July, but I'll have to consult with staff to see what their workload's like at this point.
Okay, I don't see any rush for it. Just so we
Yeah, I
get it out.
agree. I don't think
Scott?
there's any constraint.
Yes.
Scott, before we end this, we've talked about permits refunds policy. Is that gonna be a part of the operations code?
Permit
If
refund
it-
policy. Where is that right now? Do we have such a policy?
No, we don't. Remember how OCSD has a
Yeah.
policy where, there's a time frame where people can ask for refunds if they submitted plans and decided not to continue. So OCSD, they have a policy on refund after a certain year. If you don't continue, then you can't ask for a refund.
I think we have a policy now set by the state of 6 months.
Yeah, but the question came up, and Alan remember it had come up over the two people on the west side that had asked for the 10-year refunds.
Correct. There is a chapter, and you're right, there is a chapter on refunds. And the board has directed staff to bring that back for revise after what the board did a couple months ago with those refunds. Do you want, we could bring that back to the committee, or do you want us to just move forward and bring it to the board? What's your pleasure?
Let's bring it forward to the board.
I agree with Art. Bring it forward to the board.
But
I'm
Scott,
not talking. I'm
Go
not
ahead, Caitlin.
talking about the assessment refunds,
Right.
the trash and sewer refunds. I'm referring to the building permits, plan checking, fixture fees refund.
Right, and then we can add that on to the refund policy. We can add that on to it.
Okay.
Yeah, let's keep it all consistent.
Mhm.
Okay.
Now, in the spirit of consistency, I also think it's important that if the board has a policy, that the board follows it.
Are you saying we should follow policy, Sue? Are you demanding
That
we
is
follow
exactly
policy?
what I'm saying.
Well, I think Mike
Of
and I
all the
did.
boards I've ever been on, this one does it the best.
That's right.
Okay, I think we have our directions. Is there anything else for discussion? And then does everyone agree this will be our last meeting today?
Yes, unless something pops up that we're not aware of at this time, but I think we're
Yeah.
done.
Okay.
The one thing, Scott, I mean, do we have a policy or a program that this kind of interaction that we've done, I think, would we do it 3 or 4 years ago? You guys, Arlene and Art did it. Maybe we need to codify how often we're going to do this, because this was really valuable. I know I learned a lot of stuff, and I think maybe we need to get on a schedule for doing this, if that's possible.
Okay.
Can we add that to the strategic plan? Because I know we do have something about reviewing policies in there.
Sure.
Yeah, that's not a bad idea.
And then I just have a quick question about the final document for review. Is there a list of, I know it's in minutes whenever you have a meeting, but is there going to be just a list of all the edits that are supposed to be put into the operations code and everything that was reviewed? And the reason I'm asking is because I missed one meeting. So there's going to be a whole section of stuff that I didn't even know about.
Yeah, when we present this to the board, we do like a strike through add-on type of edit, so they can see exactly what was added, what's recommended to be added, what's recommended to be deleted. So it's
Perfect.
a edited form.
Perfect. Thank you.
Sounds good. Are we finished?
Okay. Yeah, I think so. So thank you everyone for serving on this committee, and we will bring those revisions to the board here in the near future for adoption consideration.
Sounds good. Good job,
Yeah,
Scott.
thank all of
Good
you.
job, everybody.
Great. Thank you, everyone.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
Have a good
Bye.
day.